Should we begin with Idi Amin?
Mm,
Good point to begin.
good point to begin.
Okay. You'll have to give some context on Idi Amin and everything that he's known for. And you also said that his reign didn't lead to much for Uganda.
It actually led to complete disaster for Uganda because you take your most productive population, which is the Indians out there. And why were Indians so important in Africa? Because the profit margins were razor thin. Most capitalists would not go there. It was your average Patel and Shah from Gujarat who would go there, operate in those razor thin margins, and bring development in that area. And he, of course, did not like Indians because he felt they controlled the economy. He didn't realize how crucial their role was for Uganda. One fine day, he decides to tell them all to get out. They have to leave in 6 months. They can't take any of their property with them. All of it has to be left behind. You can, at best, take very little with you. Which was still, what he did to the Indians was still better than what he did to his own countrymen, which was killing huge numbers of them, usually in extremely sadistic, brutal ways. And he destroyed Uganda, which is why his government didn't survive. Right? It collapsed quite rapidly because, let's put it this way, he wasn't a good dictator in that he didn't even know how to maintain power properly. Bit like Pol Pot. When you go over a certain limit, you need to have state power to maintain control. And the reason modern dictators, that's to say late 19th and 20th century dictators, seem so much worse is because industrialization and modern stuff like telephones, telegram, railways, they allow a state to maintain much more pervasive, in your face control over a society. So you have a dictator who was probably much crazier than Stalin. I wouldn't consider Stalin crazy, but anyway. But with none of the capacity of Stalin. Stalin realized in order to be that level of crazy, you had to build railways, you had to build industry, you had to build a secret police, you had to build telephone, telegram, all of that. Idi Amin didn't. So just like Pol Pot, who literally deindustrialized Cambodia, killing off almost a third of his own population, they just withered away. The neighboring armies invaded, and that was it. Poof.
Have you watched this film called The Last King of Scotland?
Oh yeah,
I
it's
don't.
very tame.
What do you mean?
It doesn't really show how much of a whack job the man was.
If someone's not seen The Last King of Scotland, that's the film I'd point them towards to really kind of immerse themselves into the subject of dictators. While I was growing up, I heard this legend about Idi Amin that he used to consume human meat. I don't know whether that's an urban legend or...
No, he actually did.
Okay.
He actually consumed human meat of his enemies, but this is a very common thing in equatorial Africa. You will still have, albinos are still considered witches in Africa, and your life expectancy if you're an albino is next to nothing. You will be caught, you will be killed, you will be hacked up, and you will be eaten. It's the same for pygmies in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Even today?
Even today, they're caught, they're killed, and they're eaten. Oh yeah, they're eaten. So this is actually very common. You have a whole load of African dictators, modern dictators, who have done this. There was this guy called Bokassa in Burkina Faso, I think, yeah, or was it Shad or Mali, one of those. The guy was so mad, he crowned himself the next Napoleon. He actually had the French make him a throne the way Napoleon's throne was made. So you have the last king of Scotland in Idi Amin. Bokassa thought of himself as the second avatar of Napoleon. He literally wore the same clothes that Napoleon wore for his coronation. He even had his crown made the way Napoleon's crown was made, and declared himself emperor. Right. So you get this stuff, right? It's really kooky stuff. And in that sense, I get Mussolini, Hitler, Mao, and Stalin are better because they went identifiably mad. These guys, you can argue, are identifiably mad.
How does a madman like that rise to the top? Because it honestly takes at least 2 decades to be in a position to even become a dictator.
Yes, but you can rise to the top because you're willing to break taboos that other people aren't. You know, your psychopathy is so great. You're willing to do things other people are not. You essentially out brutalize everybody else, right? That's exactly how people like Bokassa or uh, Idi Amin come about.
Hmm. So very, very brutal in their origin years.
Yeah.
Very often a product of a military background.
A military or an imagined military background.
What does that mean?
Uh, they have great delusions of being Julius Caesar or Alexander or Napoleon, the great generals. Uh, they're not, but in a localized environment, they feel that because they keep winning victories, they are the next Alexander or Napoleon. You've also had dictators who didn't have a military background. So, for example, Mao Zedong or Stalin, they barely ever fought. Hitler at least fought as a colonel in World War One. Mussolini never did. He was a journalist. He was a very smart journalist, by the way. You know, he used to speak 5, 6 different languages. He used to speak fluent English, by the way. Um, but Stalin or Mao never fought. And yet he used to call himself Marshal Stalin, right? Uh, they did not have military backgrounds necessarily, but military attire, this wanting you to believe that they are Grand Marshal or Field Marshal or Grand Admiral or, I don't know, Air Chief Marshal. No dictator's ever been in it. Actually, you know, Assad's father, Hafiz al-Assad, was the only dictator I know who was from the Air Force. Other than that, there have always been ground generals who have become, for whatever reason, I don't know. But not necessarily military backgrounds. And in fact, Stalin is the counterpoint to this. You know, his entire strategy was to not be precocious. He used to take all the jobs that other people didn't want. So his great, under Lenin, there were two people who, I'm simplifying history a bit. There were two people who were the rising stars. One was Leon Trotsky, the other was Stalin. Trotsky was all, you know, flamboyance. He wanted all the sexy jobs. You know, defense is sexy, gimme defense. Finance is sexy, gimme finance. Stalin was like, okay, nobody wants public sanitation. Who wants public toilets? Nobody wants education. Fine, I'll take education. He accumulated power by getting all the useless, what were considered non sexy, useless ministries. And that is how he accumulated power. So, you know, this term we have called Chupa Rustam. He was the Chupa Rustam. So he was the exact diametric opposite of people like, say, Idi Amin.
Quietly building up his power over the
Quietly,
years.
yeah. Institutional bureaucratic dictatorship. You accumulate bureaucratic powers that nobody wants, and then you're too powerful before anybody realizes it.